Hello and welcome to the Genius Podcast. I am your host, Karen Doyle, and I would like to invite you to join me and countless other Catholic women as we not only discover our own genius, but we own it, and then we bring it as a gift to the world and the people we do life with. The Genius Podcast is part of a much bigger initiative for Catholic women called the Genius Project. The Genius Project is dedicated to helping Catholic women discover their unique genius, what it is they are called to do with their gifts and their life. I hope and pray that you will come away inspired and, as St. Catherine of Siena said, set the world ablaze with your genius. I am so excited to bring you something really special this week. I am involved with Sisterhood, which is a national Catholic women's movement. We host Australia's main National Catholic Women's Conference, as well as support women to form Sisterhood Connect groups. These groups are made up of approximately 5 to 7 women who meet on a regular basis in someone's home, and they are a beautiful place of support, formation, and prayer. This year, we were 4 days off hosting our national conference when the world went into lockdown. This left so many women ready to be spiritually fed at the conference, but not able to attend the event. With the COVID shutdown, so many women expressed feeling really isolated, and they expressed a deep need for connection despite social distancing. So the Sisterhood movement set up virtual Sisterhood Connect groups for women right around the country. And we decided to do a book study on Fr Jacques Philippe's book, Searching for and Maintaining Inner Peace. Women met online once a fortnight and worked through the book. We produced a beautiful PDF journal for them to go deeper in their personal prayer time, as well as a podcast which unpacked each chapter. It is this podcast that I am so excited to share with you through the Genius Project. For 6 podcasts, I am joined by Therese Nichols, a female Catholic entrepreneur and founder of One Plate, as well as Sister Mary Helen, a Dominican sister of St. Cecilia, Nashville, Tennessee. These 2 women are incredibly special and have been a really important part of my journey. You will see and experience their beautiful heart through our conversation. We had such a blessed time recording these conversations, and we really hope and pray that they will be a blessing to you. Oh, it's so nice to connect with you both again. We recorded a few of the podcasts earlier on, and we've had quite a few weeks off, so it's really nice to reconnect and get together again over Zoom. How are you both?
Going well. It's so lovely to chat with you both again after these few weeks. My 2 months in the country has come to an end on all those beautiful country walks. So I'm back in Melbourne in my apartment down here, which is good. So things have sort of been going back to normal, but not in Melbourne. So
because it's just exploded this week, hasn't it? Again.
It has, again. So they have put the restrictions back on with larger gatherings. So we're back down to 5 people again, which is
that's
a little bit disappointing. But a lot of meetings are starting to go back, and cafes are still open, which is good.
Yeah.
But only in small groups.
And sister, how's your weeks been?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty full. We're in HSC exam sort of preparation time, so catching up on a lot of assessments that were missed. So, it's pretty busy at school. But it's good. The kids are now humming along. It's really lovely to watch them work. So, it's good.
That's good. That is good. It's been a bit weird, hasn't it? I found as I put my head out, because, after everyone being in isolation, it's taking a while for people to reconnect. And I thought it was just me. But as I talk to people, it seems that a lot of people are actually finding it difficult finding a new rhythm and getting back into, I guess, post-isolation life and trying to reconnect with people.
I think that what's been really beautiful at school is listening to the kids talk about the friendships that they're building with their brothers and sisters, because they had to be friends because they're the only people that they had in their house. And it's so nice. Anyway, that's just been a lovely little observation.
Yeah. Well, my kids have met all the neighbourhood children, which we've never done in 12 years living in this home. Gosh. So They've got this neighbourhood gang now. There's about 10 of them, and they go mountain biking and they're building these massive jumps, much to my horror.
It is beautiful seeing the graces that have come out of isolation with new connections, with new friendships, and people, even old friendships that have been rekindled through the phone and through Zoom, of people being more aware, I think, and mindful of others and where they're at, and connecting on a deeper level of through shared struggles. Because even though, I mean, everybody's going through this in a different way and people have different struggles within it, whether it's financial or family, whatever it might be, but it's all because of the same thing. So there's this global understanding, which is really interesting. It's united many people in a bizarre way, even though we can't actually connect physically.
I think I found this book to be particularly helpful during this season because it's really challenged me. And just coming, I guess, now that we're nearing the end of it, like we're finishing in this podcast episode, we're going to finish part 2 of the book and looking at ways that we lose our peace. But I think, I mean, I read this book for the first time 6 or 7 years ago, and it was so powerful back then. But as I read it this time, and obviously I'm taking more time with it because we have to do the podcast, so you really do know what you're talking about. I'm reading it through a different lens, and it's been incredibly powerful and challenging too. There's no coincidence in the fact that we're doing this book study during this time, and I think God's doing a deeper work that in my life that I can't actually put into words at the moment. But you know when you sense He's doing something, even though you can't see it. And the one thing that I've come away with just this past week actually was at the beginning of this year, my sisterhood small group, we all decided, we asked God for a word for us for the year, each woman in the group. And so I've shared before, mine was pursue peace, just came into my mind. And I've said that I wish I could withdraw that because and I felt like, you know, the more I pursued peace, the more it seemed to slip away, or more situations were coming into my life that really challenged my peace. But I've come to realize that it's not just peace, but God gave me the word pursue peace. And that word pursue really stood out for me this week because, and I'll be honest, you know, like the past week probably wasn't my best week. I've been feeling quite flat, just with lots of challenges and things. And I was really struck by that word pursue peace, and particularly the word pursue. And I was reminded of St. Augustine's quote that said, "He who created you without your cooperation, He will not save you without your cooperation." Yes. And there's that link about cooperation and pursuit of peace that I actually have responsibility. There's a lot, yes, that's outside my control. Absolutely. There's things that feel like they're falling apart that are way outside my control. But in the middle of that, I think what this book is showing me is that there is actually a lot that I can do. Like I'm not helpless. I'm not just, you know, life just isn't happening to me, but that I can actively pursue, I can actively cooperate with God's grace. And I think for God's grace to be abundant in our life, it does require that level of cooperation from us.
Yeah, I love that, Karen. And it reminds me of what St. Joan of Arc said when she said, act and God will act. And when we step up, that's when we, in a way, we give permission to God. We unlock something there for God's grace to start flowing. It's interesting when you said the word at the beginning of the year. Every year I do something similar. I pray for 3 words for the year that I can really live out and act and receive from God, to be mindful of those words to be during that year. And usually the words I get are words like love, joy, peace, faith, prayer, fun, whatever they might be. But the word that I got this year was it sounds bizarre, it sounds a bit funny, but the word that I got was white space. And in design, a lot of designers use the word white space in order to create white space on whether it's a wall or an image for the image to stand out even more. And so this word, which is so different from all, the virtuous words I might get up here, white space. I'm like, what does that mean? Yeah. And I really felt in prayer that God was saying, clear the table and create more white space in your life for me to speak to you, and for you to just to be still, be present, and to have that interior quietness. And so that was on the 1st of January, and pretty much all through January and February was anything but white space. It was so busy and full, and it was my choice. Like, I filled it up with stuff, and I was traveling and working, and there wasn't that white space that I knew God was calling me to, until the end of March, when we went into lockdown, and suddenly my social calendar was clear. There was no meetings, there was no travel, and suddenly there was this time, and I'm so grateful to God for it, because I started to learn what that meant, of white space, of that stillness and peace. And through that time, I feel like God has been teaching me about what it means to be, not do, and to have that interior quietness. And I can pray and ask God to give me all the peace that I need. But if I'm actually not actively, as you said, Karen, pursuing that and acting and asking and being and living that peace, then it's hard to receive that peace. So it's been a time of growth for me, and learning over these few months of what interior quietness and stillness means, and the importance of being, not doing.
I like that white space. And I've decided my word for next year is going to be ice cream, because terrible can come from ice cream.
Oh God!
Do you sense a resistance to growth there?
Yeah, something's going on.
That's funny.
That's funny. I'm sitting here thinking, wow, it's very interesting, because I do the same thing. But what's striking me more is this morning I was talking to my students. Every day we read the gospel for a while. Like I just said, you cannot graduate my class without having read the gospels, and they're really good. They get into it. But today we were talking, Jesus was talking in the parables, whoever has ears to hear should listen. Just kind of making me think about, we're trying to do that. We are trying to cooperate with grace. We're all trying to listen. It's not enough just to hear. You have to listen. And the kids were saying, I was like, what does that mean? Well, we have to have that heart open system. I'm like, yeah, amen. And I said to them, there's not one day in your life that God has decided he's not going to speak to you today. He has a word for each of us every day if we are listening. And I think it's just interesting. I'm sitting here going, wow, we're trying. Trying to hear God, and he is speaking, and maybe that whisper that happened whenever that word came to us. Yeah, well, we haven't forgotten, and he keeps speaking through that. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful, and that leads very nicely into this episode where we're talking about the reasons that cause us to lose peace. And I think, sister, what you said, we'll get to that towards the end, when he talks about looking at what happens when we have big decisions to make, or really trying to hear from God. But in the last episode, we spoke about the reasons that cause us to lose our peace can be things like suffering in other people and others' behaviour, obviously. But this week we're going to turn our attention, and he spends quite a bit of time. In fact, he spends an entire half of part 2 of the book looking at us as individuals. So turning our attention towards ourselves and how we lose our peace because of ourselves, not because of others, or not because of outside circumstances, but because of ourselves. And so he breaks down 3 areas that this happens. He said, number 1 is we lose patience with ourselves. We bash ourselves up and over our faults and our imperfections. The second area is in our sin, and when we do sin and we do fall. And then finally, he says, the third area is when we experience unrest, when we have decisions to make. And so I've really enjoyed reading this section particularly, and it's been really good. And I think everybody who listens to this is on a different point of their faith journey. But I would say that and he does highlight this as well, that at the start of our faith journey, obviously we have sin in our life, and so a lot of our energy is sort of directed towards overcoming sin and to growing in virtue with God's grace. But he says as we develop on the spiritual journey, there becomes a great temptation, which is always before us. So the holier we get, or the more we grow in holiness, this temptation becomes even greater. And he says that it's the one that the enemy he exploits us, and he uses it to discourage us on our spiritual journey so that we drop our gaze from Christ, and even just for a second. But anytime we drop our gaze from Christ, we run the danger of becoming really discouraged. And he said it's around our experience of how we deal with our own faults. And I thought this was a really, really insightful chapter, because he said sometimes, despite our best efforts, actually often, all the time, despite our best efforts, we still fail. And we can become so discouraged. We can be really upset. We can be frustrated with God. Why don't you heal me? Why don't you save me? Why don't you fix this area of my life? So I guess the question is, how do we deal with our faults? And asking that question, when I fail, when I'm imperfect, he's created me imperfect. So how do I deal with that? So I'm interested from both of you, how do you both deal with, I guess, when you fail or when you fall down? How do you approach that experience that we all feel of? I think the temptation to berate ourselves and to really keep scolding ourselves is always there. So I guess, how do you deal with that in your own life?
I remember when I was younger and I didn't deal with it well, as well. I probably still don't deal with it great, but I remember I discovering why it was that I didn't deal with it well when I was younger. It was this kind of thought one day. I think I had it in my mind as a young thing that we were trying to sort of arrive at this state of grace, where you don't fall anymore. And it was just so impossible. And I was really trying, I kept trying and trying, and you'd never get there. And I thought, gosh. And so every time you would fall, it would be a frustration because I did it again. And it's just a reason to be upset.
Yeah.
But when it's beautiful when you just a little bit of formation, and you realize, no, actually, you're in grace. God is living in you. You're living a life of grace, and just that intellectual shift changed the way I could respond to falls a lot. I mean, drastically, because it became a life, and life is a bit organic, and it has its ups and its downs, and it's not supposed to be all linear and beautiful, clean. And it really, I think that suffering under this false ideal probably causes more problems, than just being it's a life of grace and God is living in us, and more, cooperate with him. And another great piece of advice I received was, to learn to laugh at yourself. Because then it's just funny. You're like, of course I would do that. I mean, of course, that's hilarious, and to think in this moment, if my desire is to please God, then I'd start to form a habit of looking at him. And so then if you fall over, what does he want but to pick you up? So he's standing there with his arms open. The worst thing I could do is sit in the corner and fold over myself and berate myself when he's just, and leave him hanging, leave him waiting for me to just get back up. So that even visual has helped me tremendously.
That's beautiful.
So what's the objective now? Run back in his arms,
That's really beautiful. What about you, Therese? How do you deal with your faults?
Having, I suppose, a self-awareness to be aware of what those faults and sin are, and to see the truth within that. And Father Jacques talks about it a lot, about taking the drama out of it, because I know times where, I'm really, as you were saying, Sister Mary Helen, of just trying so hard, we can become nearly scrupulous, and we try so hard that it becomes a drama in a sense. And I think for me, it was nearly taking the drama out of that and the acceptance of we all sin, we all have faults. We're not God. He is our Savior. And that, I suppose that in a way, that striving, that trying, that hustling of that I don't have to hustle for my for God to love me. It's just that complete acceptance of who I am and that God loves me, of where I'm at, who I am at, and who I am, and to continue to try to be better and to strive in holiness. But it's that acceptance. And it's actually something, it was through reading this book actually 7 years ago. I shared the story a couple of episodes back when I first read this book in Assisi. And it was when Father Jacques said, I've got it written here, I highlight it here in the book on page 64. He says, without making ourselves sad or discouraged, we should recover our peace as quickly as possible, thanks to graces from on high, and resume our normal spiritual life as if nothing has happened. The more quickly we recover our peace, the better it will be. And I think it's that getting up. I think a saint said it, that what's a quote where a saint is somebody who falls and then gets back up again. And it's that I know that, until I'm in heaven, that I will fall and I'll make mistakes and I'll have faults. But it's knowing, I suppose it's that that willpower to stand back up again and receive that peace, accept who I am, continuing to always strive, continuing to always climb the ladder,
and
but
try.
knowing that and try that I'll fall back again, but getting up again and again. And I think it's also having that affirmation in the morning of saying that I won't be discouraged. And Father Jacques talks about that in the book as well, of saying each morning I will never become discouraged, that to not let our faults discourage us and to get us down, because then that becomes the work of the devil. That's where this lie comes in, to try and discourage us through our own faults. Even though it's a good thing that we're trying so hard to be better and to be perfect like God, the devil can steal that truth away, turn it into a lie and discourage us, and suddenly we can't get back up. We're falling down. And so I do love that part in the book when Father Jacques just says, resume, as if nothing has happened. And that's where I just believe, for me personally, the power of confession is just extraordinary. The riches of that sacrament of confession, to be able to go to reconciliation, to be able to know and believe in the power of God's grace and the power of God's mercy in that moment, and our sin is forgiven, and then we can move on in full confidence, which unlocks that peace within us. And I think a lot of it, actually, we know that the sacrament of confession is powerful and God's mercy is never ending. A lot of it is in our own belief, in knowing how powerful God is in that moment of confession and believing it. And doubting it is actually doubting God's mercy.
Yes, and his gift.
His gift. So it's really knowing that we are forgiven in that moment, and because we are forgiven, we shouldn't be discouraged, that we should be able to get back up again and keep moving on. And knowing that that time that we fell down isn't going backwards. That moment of falling down can be our greatest moments of growth. That's what can actually move us forward. And I think Father Jacques talks about that, or perhaps it was one of the saints of, these great saints became great saints because through their fallings, through their faults, that's what actually made them grow. And I suppose that goes back to our decision of, are we going to act? Are we going to take this? And it's what you were talking at the beginning, Karen, of about pursuing peace. Do we make that decision to say, okay, I've fallen, but I'm going to take those lessons and use it to grow closer to God?
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that's what he moves on to say, and he makes a big point of this, he quotes St. John of the Cross, and he says, love is able to profit from everything, the good as well as the bad, that it finds in me, and to transform it into itself. And he goes on to say the sign of spiritual progress is not so much never falling as it is being able to lift yourself up quickly after you fall. And it takes a lot of pressure off. I mean, obviously we don't want to be complacent and say, oh, well, we can just do whatever we like. But we do need to be, we need to have good intentions and do try and do strive towards living a good and a holy life. But when we do fall, and inevitably we will, multiple times a day, being able to pick ourselves up quickly and not to, I think sometimes when we do something bad or we hurt another person or say someone has serious sin in their life, the temptation there to berate yourself, I think, comes from this mindset that you need to be punished. And if God isn't going to punish you, then you need to punish yourself. And so those negative thoughts that really, talk you into a hole and talk you out of your worth and talk you out of God's mercy, I mean, that is the enemy. And that's what he's saying in this chapter, that is the way that Satan gets in to discourage us. And we really have to guard against that. I thought last night, actually, I got a message from Jonathan this morning, and it was a really nice text. He just said, you did a remarkable job debriefing. 2 of our children had an argument on the mountain last night. He said, you did an incredible job debriefing the fight, and you did a more incredible job at teaching them emotional intelligence. And when they came home, they were both so fired up, and they said things to each other, and we talked it out, and finally they could hear one another and the heart behind the other, rather than looking at the offence at what happened. And they both apologised, and they were very sweet. It was such a beautiful moment witnessing them hearing the other and then owning what they did in the situation, asking for forgiveness. And then we spoke about what they could both do differently next time. And it was a really beautiful moment where they forgave one another. And one of my children was quite upset still, but not because of what the other person had done to them, but because of what they had done. And they were crying and just saying, well, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And I said, but you've been forgiven, your siblings forgiven you, and God's forgiven you. So we don't have to talk about it again. It's all good. We just move on. And we just learn the lessons from this situation so that it doesn't happen next time. I said to them, the only bad mistake in life is the one that we never learn from. So it's, and that's what he's saying. It's not so much making the mistake. It's not so much sinning or falling down. But it's like when we don't learn or when we don't quickly pick ourselves up. And my parents are just 2 of the most beautiful humans on the planet. But my dad had this philosophy of parenting, and it's very much in line with everything we're reading here. It's very godly. But he said, we need to discipline quickly, swiftly, cleanly, and then welcome back into the fold quickly. Because it's like, okay, just deal with the behaviour and then let's welcome back with no shame, no strings attached, and no lingering of you're bad, because I think that's what shame is. Shame doesn't say what I did was bad. It says I'm bad. Yes. And that's like a wound that I think so many of us as humans carry, and it comes so often from our experiences growing up, where we do this. We take a message and we tell ourselves we're bad, I'm this, I'm that. Well, God doesn't do that with us. And part of pursuing peace and finding and maintaining peace in our heart is very much that we do that. We allow God to convict us, the Holy Spirit to convict our heart, but then, and we own that, we take responsibility, we apologize to the Lord and to others, and then we move on swiftly.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Karen. And it just reminds me, I suppose, of the scripture, his mercy is new every day. And the way Jesus doesn't linger on, sometimes we see God the way through our own lens. If we linger on something or we draw something out or we find it hard to forgive someone and it might take us days or months or even years, we can merely put that on God, that's how God must act and towards us. But yeah, he doesn't linger. disappears. We say sorry and it goes and it's done and he moves on, and it's that starting every day anew, isn't it? I love in the book where Father Jacques draws it out a little bit around the scripture, everything works together for the good of those who love God, and to believe that God is good and that he is all powerful and enough to draw good. He is all powerful enough to draw good from everything, including our faults, which is amazing when we think of what our faults are and our sin and our shortcomings and, you know, all the gifts that we don't have. Even within all of that, God can draw out so much good and can actually transform things around us through our own faults, which is extraordinary.
Yes, it is, because we can't beat them in our own strength, but it's amazing that he can do something good from them. He talks about us, our imperfections, and then our sin. And then he talks about how we can lose peace when we have decisions to make. And I think this is a big one, actually, for a lot of Catholics, because I think we get really caught up in trying to make the right decision or know what God's actual will is. And I think we can become paralyzed in that process and lose a lot of peace.
Yeah, I think he's very balanced in the way he presents it, and he's clearly had a lot of experience dealing with people making big decisions. So, I mean, to have the prudence to not make big decisions in the middle of a tumultuous time, you know, like to step back and make sure there is calm about making a big decision. But at the same time, I love the way he you know, cautions against taking too much time and pondering over something for too long until we have some sort of certainty. And I think that's just not the way God works with us in general. Like we have the certainty that he is good, and we have the certainty he is with us and that he loves us. But we don't have the certainty about, you know, what he's up to or why things are the way that they are or when is he coming again. There's a lot of things that he leaves us, you know, without certainty because, you know, that's just not, it's not our place. You know, it keeps us dependent. It keeps us clinging to him and trusting him. Otherwise we try to control it all. And the whole part of the book was like, what are you trying to control your life for? And I think sometimes when we take too much time, we're actually just heading back into that area of trying to control. And I think that God has a great love for our freedom and for our intellect. He gave us an intellect to use. And I think he enjoys it when we, you know, we're prudent, we take advice, we think about what's right or wrong, and often the burdensome decisions are between good and better, you know, not between bad and good, but just make the decision and trust and be okay that maybe it ends up a mistake, and that's okay because we've done what we could. We're just so afraid of making a mistake we don't do anything at all. And maybe the mistake is what we really needed. And maybe it's not really a mistake in the end, because I see that all the time with patient discernment. You know, you can have these perpetually discerning people who never make a step. And it's just such a torture.
I love that, Sister Mary Helen, because it's that acceptance that it's okay to make the wrong decision. And I mean, there's big decisions and there's small decisions.
It's not so much whether we actually discover the code to discovering God's will as it is we have, it's a state of the heart and having a good intention that we're really seeking the Lord. But in seeking the Lord, that we don't torment ourselves to the point where we lose our peace, because that is not what he wants and that's not of God. But he just asks for goodwill and good intentions. And like you said, sister, he gives us the freedom. Like he actually wants us to decide for ourselves. And we have that freedom, and it's part of how we co-create with him, I think, in this world.
Right. Yeah.
So
I love how Father Jacques says in the book on page 72, but it may happen that the Lord does not respond to us, and this is completely normal. Sometimes he simply leaves us free, and sometimes for reasons of his own, he does not manifest himself. It is good to know this because it often happens that people, for fear of making a mistake, of not doing the will of God, seek at any price to have an answer. They increase their reflections, their prayers. They open the Bible 10 times looking for a text in order to obtain the desired enlightenment. And when I read that, I was like, that's me. I love what Father Jacques says when he says perfectionism doesn't have much to do with sanctity.
Yes, yes. I like that too.
And often I think part of the reason why we become so paralyzed in decision making is because we want things to be right. We want things to be perfect. We want the outcome of this decision to create a perfect circumstance. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't lead to our sanctity. It's what happens in between.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
You imagine that, just God looking down on us and delighting in our attempts, you know? Like, imagine you've given your child, you know, a whole bunch of art where, you know, paints and paper and everything, and they just sit there just afraid of wasting them, and they never even draw anything. You know, you don't delight, but we have all these gifts. We have our intelligence, we have our freedom, we have our, you know, all our gifts and talents that we have, and he just delights in us using them. And yeah, I think otherwise our image of God would be a bit skew if we thought, oh no, he wants it like so razor thin, exactly this way or else, you know, and he's not like that.
That's right. And sometimes I feel like he's given us those gifts and talents, and all he wants us to do is just jump in, get into the arena and give it a go. And for me, I find that engagement brings clarity. When I'm in there, I don't know whether it's right or wrong of the project that I might be doing, but if I give it a go and do a bit of a low-cost protest, have a bit of a dabble and see what happens, just engaging in whatever that decision is or engaging in that project, I get clarity through that. God speaks through that. So it's a real, to not be afraid to make mistakes, but just to jump in the arena, give it a go, and through that engagement, that will bring clarity for the next step.
He also says is if you get really stuck, because we all do at times get stuck, and you have prayed, then ask a spiritual friend. And he really spends a bit of time looking at this area of inviting somebody else in to help you. He says the mere fact of speaking to another person will generally be enough to make our confusion disappear completely and bring back our peace. He says, you know, if you've tried to regain your calm and you can't, open up to a spiritual person. And I thought that was a really beautiful insight, because I don't know, I think so many people think they have to work all this out on their own and in isolation, and that it's just between you and God. But God gives us spiritual directors. He gives us sisters in the Lord to walk with us, mentors, spiritual mothers, and all of these people are really important in, I guess, discerning God's will for our life and then walking that out in the day in, day out of wherever we find ourselves.
I think that's actually even more important than the answer. You know, it's,
it is.
It's part of that. It's being able to go to someone and be vulnerable, like, so that the humility aspect and then the friendship aspect. And not even weighing, like giving the person the burden to come up with the answer to the solution. That might not be actually what gives you the direction. Maybe the direction or the peace comes just from the fact that you were open out to somebody else and you're not doing it alone.
And I love the quote from Edith Stein. Madeline Carrington shared it on our episode on the Genius podcast on the feminine genius. And this beautiful quote is, "A woman's soul is fashioned to be a shelter in which other souls may unfold." And I love that, because it's so much the receptivity of femininity, that we are meant to be receptive to the human person. Like, that is, I guess, our genius, our gift as women. And so we need to learn to receive that from others and to give that. And it works both ways. And it's such a gift. I know in oncology, palliative care, nursing, I read a book called May I Walk You Home? And it spoke about how, you know, a midwife can give a woman a beautiful birthing experience, apart from all the pain, but she can set that up so that she has a positive experience of bringing life into the world. And this book, May I Walk You Home, was talking about how as nurses, being midwives, I guess, to the dying, how we could set people up to have a positive experience of, you know, ending their life here and going home and meeting their Lord. And even for people who aren't Christian, it changed our philosophy on our ward, this idea that we were walking people home to heaven's door. And, you know, sometimes we call it the hold of mercy. You know, that beautiful sculpture of the Pieta, Mary holding Jesus. And I read another book that talked about that being the hold of mercy, that sometimes in life when people feel like their whole worlds are being blown apart by whatever it is, just be held, whether it's physically or over the phone, to be held in love, to be, like you said, sister, to be vulnerable. And to be vulnerable means to be seen in the fullness of who you are, all of your strengths, but all of your weaknesses and your brokenness, and to be loved and to be held. I mean, I think that is the most beautiful gift that we could give anybody. Father Jacques finishes off this part of the book talking about the royal way of love. And I think, you know, just holding people in their pain is the royal way of love, walking with somebody, not necessarily having the answers, but just walking alongside them. And I love that saying, the royal way of love.
Yes.
I watched part of the Netflix series The Crown during COVID. And so I was just thinking about, you know, royalty and this idea of the royal way of love. And I don't know what your reflections are on that last part of part 2, but I'd love to hear them.
I loved that last part on the royal way to love, and how he talks about small things done with love and to please God are extremely beneficial in making us grow, and it's one of the secrets to holiness. And I think at the end of the day, it goes back to love. When St. John of the Cross said, at the end of our life, we'll be judged by love alone. And somewhere, I'm not sure where Father Jacques said it, but he said that once we receive and live that peace within our soul, that unlocks love. That's where we can really give from a place of deep love to others. And there's that, and that's where the joy comes through love.
Yeah, I love this. The very last page of that section, because the whole time he's talking about how do you keep your peace in the middle of all these things, and it's very practical. But I've experienced the truth of this, that we can work from the outside in and the inside out. You know, like this journey toward peace, this pursuing of peace, is a long one. It's a protracted journey. But he even talks about just forming habits of how do I walk up the stairs? You know, how what's my pace when I walk anywhere? Can I slow down the outside as a way of relaxing the inside? You know? And I think that's really true. This whole body and soul thing, we can work from both sides. Putting order in my in a convent, there's 3 things that are very, very practical, but they kind of give an indication of the interior. So silence, what sort of silence can I keep? What kind of order can I keep? And punctuality, am I punctual to things? They're very external, but I found working on any of those always has a positive impact on the interior. And if any of those on the outside are slipping, probably something inside slipping too. So I just really like that.
I like that. Yeah, that's beautiful. I liked how he said, Therese, you picked up on it, the small things done with love, but just even like, sister, what you said, speaking peacefully with an attitude of gentleness, avoiding excessive hurry. And we just don't realise how much, like you said, sister, the external impacts our soul. And I think COVID really highlighted that. And Therese, you picked up on it when, you know, before COVID you were rushing around and there wasn't much time or space, but that time of isolation allowed you to quieten the rhythm of your soul.
Yeah, and ensuring that, those lessons, or that I've learned through this period, that I continue to exercise and practice it. So it is for a lifetime. Otherwise, it's just something that comes and goes. And I think it's that daily that, you know, if we think of tomorrow and the future and next week and 10 years, we can become overwhelmed. But making the decision each morning when I wake up that I'm going to be slower in my steps up the stairs, or I'm going to do every small thing I do, I'm going to do it with great love, as Saint Therese of Lisieux says, no matter how small, like washing the dishes or whatever it might be. But it's making that decision for today, because today's what we have, and it makes it doable, it makes it practical, and exercising it each day, and then that builds on to the next day and the day after.
So I think that's a good place to leave it there, looking at the challenge for the week being the royal way of love. Therese, exactly as you said, what can we do each day to bring great love to the small acts that we are to do? I hope and pray that conversation was a real blessing to you, and I really encourage you to take some time before the Blessed Sacrament and allow the truths contained in this little book to really penetrate your heart and your soul. If you are interested in a copy of the PDF journal for each episode, head on over to the Genius Project, www.geniusproject.co, and fill out the form on the podcast page. Don't forget your challenge of the week, and until next week, God bless you and have a beautiful week.